Hey, this is Kyle Carver from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Crimers Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Crimers Beer House was started in 1982 by the Crimer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Crimers Beer House. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of here at Strong Dads. Hope you guys are having a good week. Here with Merle, we got a special guest in the house. But before we get into that, Merle.
Yes.
Last week, we had a challenge to our Strong Dads. What are you going to do to bridge the gap with our homeless population? What did you do? I threw a challenge out there.
You did. You threw a challenge out. Well, one thing I did, not that I was doing anything like earth-shaking or anything like that. So one thing I did is I had some great conversations about that. That show has got some pretty good traction.
Yeah.
And just the opportunity to have our show last week, we had Ken Madden on, and it was about the homeless and how us as Strong Dads really just a lot of times, whether we're not comfortable or just the idea of part of my deal was, they got themselves into that mess. They should get themselves out of that mess, that kind of thing. And just really had some great conversations this week because people listen to the show. And the number of people that have come to me and said, man, I relate to exactly what you said about how, you the judgment, right?
Yeah.
You cast judgment on them. And so, I didn't really go out and give any food away or anything like that. But I think, and that's why we did the show, was for the conversation piece.
Start that conversation.
And so I had several opportunities to do that. So took advantage of that. Now, how about you as you tried to burn me? You burned me. What's up?
Well, the conversation, it was really cool. Got to have some really good conversation with my girls at the dinner table, so that was really good. It wasn't necessarily with the homeless population, but as I talked about in my small group, challenging our small group to go out there and do something anonymous. Do something anonymous. So yesterday, Ava and I went down to Skyline and we bought someone's dinner. So
there you go.
And it was really cool because Ava just lit up. Right, she was "This is the greatest daddy date ever!" Right, and she was just so excited to be able to do that for someone. So not necessarily in the realm of the homeless population, but it's still something, just doing something for someone else, an anonymous, kind of a gesture. So
right, teaching them how to give. I think that's important. So all right, so good deal. But we better move on to today's show. As you guys can see, those of you watching our show today, we have a guest in the house, and honestly, these shows have been challenging for Kyle and I.
Yes, they have.
Challenging because they've not been like fun, silly topics where we can just go and be our knucklehead self.
Right.
We get serious about this. And today our show is, when was the last time you talked to somebody who's gone through tragedy?
Yeah.
And we have a special guest in the house, and that's Pastor Jeff Duerler. Okay.
This is our second pastor on the show, isn't it? We had Greg Eden, right?
And we have, yeah. And so, Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Oh, man, I'm so glad to be here. Yeah. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for Strong Dads.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all the listeners who are dialing in and really wanting to develop as Strong Dads. So
Yeah. Well, we appreciate them as well. And, one of the things we're always trying to do is what's the next good topic or real topic?
Yeah.
And, you can talk about politics and things like that, but I think there's an exhaustion rate of those kinds of topics. And so Kyle and I have taken on this series as an opportunity to challenge men. That's what we always try to do, challenge but encourage. Like, how do we get through these things? And hearing about your story, I didn't know you when you were going through your story, which we're going to explain in a little bit here. But hearing about it from the outside, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then when we talked about doing this show, I told Kyle, I don't know that I really want to do this because I'm going to feel like I'm fumbling all over myself, and whether I'm offending you or hurting you or just being cold or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was the reason why we wanted to do the show.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, we need to figure out how to help people that are in difficult, challenging situations.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we're going to get into that today. And I think Kyle, just so most of our listeners know, Kyle is a first responder in the EMT and fireman world. And Kyle and I were talking before you came on. Kyle, how often do you see death in your work?
It's very, very often. I'd venture to say on average about one a day. So I would say if I work say 100 days a year, I'd say 90 of those days we'll see a death of some sort. I mean, in the city where I work, I mean, for sure every single day.
Yeah.
But actually, me coming in encounter with it, me seeing that, very very often. And that's part of when we were talking about ideas of different shows. That was something that had kind of led kind of sparked this. This is a difficult one for me because when I'm working, right? And I take a great deal of pride in the fact that as cold as sometimes it may seem, I have to disconnect myself from what is going on. Obviously it's the worst day in the life of that family, and I respect that. But at the end of the day, I'm there to do a job, and I try and because if we talk all the time about emotions and how emotions can really cloud your judgment, right? So when I'm there to do a job, when I'm there for someone who does not have a pulse, is not breathing, I'm there to work. And it's not always the prettiest, and I'm there to do a job. And so I try and set my emotions aside. I try and separate myself from the situations. And that's part of where I hope the conversation goes is what happens afterwards. So we have pronounced that person is dead, right? And we have to go tell the family. And that is a hard conversation. And I'm not in the current position because I'm not an officer. I'm just a dumb fireman, right? So I don't have to go tell the family currently what that's that I'm so sorry for your loss. So the hope is for myself to begin to prepare, like let's dive into that conversation, like how do we approach a family that has gone through a significant loss. So I think it'll be a really good conversation. Like I said, that's kind of part of what sparked this idea of tragedy.
So Jeff, let's run a few ads and then let's get into the whole story, okay?
Absolutely.
So Strong Dads would like to thank Kramer's Beer House for joining us and being alongside of us and sponsoring what we do. So we want to thank all of you who go down and help out the Kramer Beer House. Go down there and get a meal, get a great setting to enjoy your evening. And so thanks to Kramer's Beer House for supporting Strong Dads and Rock Solid Families.
Awesome. Also, I'd like to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions, Garden Center, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Check them out. The season is changing, so make sure you continue to support them even in the winter months. I'm sure it's a little bit different for a garden center during the winter months, but for sure go check them out and let them know we sent you up there.
They still do an incredible job with all the gift sides. So they're ramping up for Christmas stuff already. So their doors are open for you. All right. So, Jeff, I'm going to kind of open the door to a fresh conversation. Just tell us about the tragedy. I'll call it the tragedy in your family involving your daughter, Kayla.
Yeah.
And just give us some background stories so that our listeners who don't know you can kind of connect the magnitude of all of this.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 46 years old. I've been married for 24 years. We have 2 children, Rachel and Kayla. Kayla's our older one. And I've been trying to be a strong dad my whole life, since the time the girls were born. And I just really, again, appreciate what you guys are doing to help, and all of you guys really trying to step into your calling there. So, it was 3 years ago, August 8th. It was a normal day. It was sort of a late summer day, and it was my day off, and I hadn't been taking my days off, and so this was a big deal. I'd been putting them off, and it's finally like, I'm going to do it, and I was loading up corn to set out to put for deer to come as deer season was approaching, and I could hear Kayla got up downstairs, and she was in the kitchen. I said, "Good morning, Kayla." She said, "Good morning," and then I headed off. I headed off into the woods, and I got back midday, and she was going driving. She was 16. She was learning how to drive. And on this day, her mom and my mom and dad, her grandparents, were in the car with her. And Julie and I were talking, and it was midday, and it was she just said, something seems off. Like we should have heard from Kayla. She should be back. And I said, oh, they probably did a longer drive. And so, she said the GPS says they're at this intersection. I don't understand. And she started looking online, and we saw a news story of an accident, and it looked like the car, my parents' car, and I just couldn't fathom it. I was just in denial. No. And so I didn't know what to do. My world is starting to crumble around me, trying to figure out because my parents were answering their phones, and I called the police, and it was their car, and it was an accident with a truck on a sort of an abandoned country road, and she didn't make it. She died, and the police officer told me that news, not unlike what you described a little bit ago. And the only way I know how to describe what that was like is if I was in the accident, just like a bomb went off. Like if I took a meat cleaver right now and I just chopped open your chest and I took half of your heart and I cut it out. And I just, there's a shock, there's a horror, there's almost like the smell, like trying to get my bearings, and it's like smoke is just still in the air, and I'm trying to understand. And my wife and I handled that differently. And one of the things I hear often about grief is a lot of couples that go through a trauma end up in divorce, and part of that is because they handle grief differently and don't give that permission for each other. But so my parents were air carried by helicopter to the hospital. They survived. And so I immediately thought I should go to them. My wife had a very different response. She immediately felt like she should go to Kayla's best friend, Ashley. And so that was just a very unique response. We quickly made a plan, and then the days and the weeks to follow, it was surreal now, and I still can hardly believe this is my life. It's hard for me to believe I'm the one on this show talking with you guys, and some of the listeners and people watching maybe can relate to that. But we have learned how to grieve with hope, and we have seen how God can redeem the worst possible things that can happen in this life. And so I'm here, and I think I can even share some things that maybe could be helpful for somebody else out there today.
Man, as you're sitting there talking about that, I can just, we have 5 kids, and, we all understand death is going to happen, right? But there's an order to death, right? You're supposed to go before your daughter, that kind of thing. And so when it gets disrupted, it's the shock value of, wait, this is not supposed to be happening. I think about that all the time. I have 2 older sons in the military, and I try to, sometimes my brain gets into a sick place of envisioning what would it be like if the officer came to my door and knocked on my door and told me that one of my boys had died. But you actually experienced that, and I even slapped myself saying, "Don't even think that way. Why do that?" But I think you want to mentally prepare, like what would I do? Right. Yeah. And
that's natural. That's normal.
Yeah.
For people to do that.
Yeah.
So I just knowing my background. So you said the police officer had to give you the worst news of your life, right? What is that? Obviously, you kind of dove in a little bit on what your personal response to that was. Did you have resentment or anger towards that? I mean, just because I put myself in that shoes, because those conversations happen. Like how was your response to him?
Yeah, so there was obviously a little confusion of why we weren't notified. This was hours after the accident, so there was a mix-up that someone thought we had been notified. So we were the ones who kind of had to find out. And I hold no ill will against anyone for that. Things happen,
Sure.
We're grateful. We're grateful for the emergency responders like you who were there and did their best. But she died immediately. I mean, it was not a long suffering. Actually, for that we're thankful. But anger to them, no. I didn't have any sense of holding them responsible or at fault. But I haven't actually gone through an intensity of anger stage. Like a lot of people talk about anger at God. How could I be angry at the one who saved her? That's just how I feel.
I want to stop you.
Yeah.
What do you mean, the one who saved her?
So, I hope many of you, all of you, know the good news that God made it possible for us to live on after our bodies die. And so my daughter Kayla had a clear faith in Jesus Christ as her Savior. And it would be almost as if Jesus shoved her off of the road and took the hit of God's wrath that she deserved. My daughter was a wonderful, we speak of her in present tense, she is an amazing person, but she was not perfect. Mm-hmm. She fell short of God's standard. And Jesus said, let me take the hit for you. And so we believe she is saved eternally. And frankly, what every dad wants for your kids is for them to be safe and to be whole. And so for her, we're thrilled. She is that. We just feel the pain and loss of her not being here with us.
Yeah, you feel the physical loss in our human state is something we just can't avoid. Yeah. But, I stopped you about being saved because from a lot of people's perspective, it'd be like, what do you mean saved? You just lost. Mm-hmm. You lost somebody so close to you. But I think, without getting all preachy, and here you are a preacher, and I think often, I don't know how people do death or life without God. Because there's too many unknowns. You have this weird thing called hope now that actually creates an energy that allows you to get your head off the pillow every day.
Absolutely.
Mm. And I don't know how, if you were to come to some realization that she's in the ground, that's as good as it gets right there, and there's nothing. Now you have a void now, a complete void. So just for a bit, how did your faith come into carrying you and Julie, even in your different ways of grieving?
So it's pretty common for people who have faith to think about going to heaven when you die. And our understanding of the teaching in the Bible is that God's plan is to restore all that's been broken, all that's been lost. And so he is focused and intense on redeeming what's been stolen and what's been lost. And so we look forward to a day when he's going to make all things new. He's going to wipe away every tear, and every wrong is going to be righted. He's going to restore everything that's broken in this world. And so even if we didn't have a clear faith that Kayla would be restored in relationship with her, we have a rock solid hope that God's going to make all things right. And so I don't know how to process life without that hope. Many people do and find some ways to cope. All I know is that it has been a healing flow in our lives.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, Jeff, I'm sure there's so many little intricacies of that time in the story that some maybe you have forgotten, some you don't maybe want to talk about, but I want to open up the can a little bit to the idea of, okay, so how do you help now others who might be going through those kind of challenges or working with people of those? So I have just some simple thoughts, and I know Kyle does as well, but so let's say I know you at the time. What don't I say? What is the wrong thing to say?
Yeah, and you kind of let in earlier with that, feeling like you're at a funeral and just not sure what to say. And a lot of people feel that, and they err on the side of saying nothing. And something someone said to me early on was, just understand a lot of people, for fear of hurting you, will say nothing. You need to let them know it's going to hurt worse for them to say nothing than to say something that might be the wrong thing. And that's a powerful thing. And it's true. It was true for us. I should preface everything by saying our story is unique. Everybody's different. I'm not a trained clinical counselor. All I know is for us. There are different stages and seasons too. And so what might be appropriate in one stage or feel like a good fit isn't a good fit in another. Like if you're in an anger stage, I don't know if there's anything you could say that's helpful and constructive. Like everything's gonna.
Right.
But if you're in a deep stage of sadness, you're longing for hope. You're looking for hope, and so you're looking for words of comfort. We had all these cards that came in, and I'm sure we'll talk about practical things people can do. And we really appreciated all the love and the support we got from total strangers as well as our closest friends and family. And as we opened the cards, we created 2 stacks. We didn't think about it. We just involuntarily did it. One stack was the cards that said, "There are no words," and they signed their name. The other stack was people who had words of encouragement. And we kept and reviewed the stack that had words. So I think a lot of times people say there are no words. And that's understandable. What they mean is I don't know what I could say to help.
Right, yeah.
But for us, and in our situation, we were longing for and looking for words of hope and words of encouragement and words of life, and we received those. So we could talk a little more about that. But I would even rewind before what not to say, and to say how and why you approach somebody is just as or more important than what you actually do say. And by that I mean we could sniff out if somebody had empathy and compassion. They could say all the right words and not have compassion, and it meant a fraction of what it meant for somebody to stumble through saying the wrong thing, but the care that was there. And I think a lot of guys we are not emotionally mature to even tap into our own feelings,
Right.
much less have sensitivity to the feelings of others.
Yeah.
So this is an area that we've got to grow in. But the manliest man who walked the face of the earth. Okay, who's the manliest man who's ever walked? You can't say yourself.
I was just saying,
Kyle
not you.
is open to. Who's the manliest man who ever walked the face of the earth?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. This man was aware of and tapped into his own emotions. He wept publicly. He was moved by compassion. People in the most broken state felt safe with him. And so we see in Jesus our example that he was tapped into that emotion, that compassion, that care. And even like so now I'm going to get a little preachy on you, but I was studying Paul this last week. The Apostle Paul, you think about him as this bold, in your face, and he was bold, but it said he was gentle like a mother with her babies.
Yeah.
So wow, like I think we need to grow in that area. So that's the first thing I'd say. What do I say? Rewind. Do you care? Start there. And then if you say, yeah, I do care. I care deeply. You know, what should I say? What should I not say? What do you think? What do you guys think are some things that you think maybe you should or shouldn't say?
You know, I think it's very important for me to always read who I'm dealing with. Yeah. And that's part of our training, is part of what we do in counseling work. And so a lot of it is reading what you believe they need. So you triggered me in thinking that, because like if somebody's angry, there's nothing you're going to say that's going to come. That's an extreme emotion. Yeah. So if you're angry at the world, if you're angry at God, and all of a sudden I say something like, hey, God's got a purpose for this or something, I probably am going to get punched. Okay. Yep. And so, so part of it is stepping back and just reading them rather than reading yourself. Yeah. Being more concerned about like, I don't know what to do. Well, how about just look in their eyes? Just look in their eyes. I mean, and people don't cover that very well, right? Sure. That's why they wear sunglasses when it's extreme. They just can't, they don't know what to do with the emotion. So, so part of what I think we have to learn to do is just look at them instead of yourself and see what they're presenting. Yeah. And God gives us the words or the actions at that time. And like sometimes you just go over and you just shake their hands or hug them. And maybe that's all that needs to be done right there. Yeah, that's just show
the presence.
Of care.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, again, just to two parts. My professional world, like in school, in medic school, they talk about not dancing around the conversation, that conversation has to happen, and it's not this, your loved one has passed or your loved one is no longer with us. You're very, for lack of better words, you're blunt. Your loved one died. They are not here. They're dead. And because when you say that person has passed or things didn't go well, there's still a little bit of a hope that the family can hold on to. And it's not that you're trying to crush the hope, but in the professional world, we have to be very blunt in that aspect. When I think of my personal experience, not nearly to the extent that you've gone through, Jeff, but just one of the things that I want to know, like what to say. Am I looking for permission? Because I've had my obviously I'm sure a majority of you strong dads out there have had loss in your life. Maybe not to the extent that we're talking here, but like, am I able to say your daughter's name? like you obviously said you want that, right? So just my personal experience, I had a second cousin that died, and who I spent time with, and when I'm around his mom, like I'm almost looking for her to give me that permission to say Josh's name, right? I want her to say it because she, talking about different seasons and the grieving process, like I don't know where she's at in that. So when I'm around her, it's hard because I want to talk about him and I want to share the experience. But in the same sense, if she's not able to take that and experience, talk about him in the same way, then it almost it's that I guess awkwardness.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, how do you want like do you find it best to give people permission to talk about your daughter, or are you just, again, going back to that compassion, where they're at, if they come in a place where they are empathetic to what you're going through? Is that more along the lines of how you find situations?
Well, that's a great example that you gave. And a lot of people aren't going to be aware enough to initiate, to say, I give you permission to talk and say Kayla's name. And so in that situation, I think a great approach might be to say, is it okay? What was the name of the...
My cousin Josh.
Is it okay to talk about Josh?
Yeah.
And just ask. And what you might find is tears welling up in that person's eyes. And there's a depth of longing for that person to not be forgotten, to not be a mist that's gone. And so they may say no, and not everyone's at a place where that's helpful in the moment. But I just know for us, and to this day, actually, it's 3 years later, and people aren't asking as much. And that's what sent me into a bit of a 6-month ordeal of numbness. I'm out of it now, but it was coming up on the 3-year anniversary. People weren't talking about Kayla. It felt like she was slipping through my fingers, and it was making things harder, and it was like she was forgotten. And so the best thing for us is to say, and if someone wasn't sure, to say, is it okay to talk about Kayla? We'd say, absolutely, we're longing for that. And then to say, one of my favorite memories is, or one of the things I do is when I'm talking to someone who mentions a loved one's passed, or they had a death in their family or a friend, I say, what was he like? What was she like? And I've never had anybody say, I don't want to talk about it. Immediately. There's a quickness to begin to talk about that person. And so I think asking a question, if in doubt, is just to say, first of all, I am so sorry. If so, in a new situation of loss or tragedy, just to, that you can't go wrong with that and mean it. Like, I am just so sorry, period. And just kind of let that sit and just, one of the things that was, you said, what is not the right thing to say. Yeah. One of the hardest things for me was when people never connect, like friends never said, I'm so sorry. And they just assumed I felt that, but I felt like it needed to be said. And it was just awkward. It was just awkward. I'm talking with a friend and they're talking about life and they never even connected to this, my world. I didn't know if I was going to live. Half my heart was gone. Like, am I going to make it through this? And so I am so sorry. That feels like I love you. I love you. That's another thing. I love you so much. I care about you. Is it okay to talk about? Can I share a memory? Can I talk about this person? I don't feel like that's going to go wrong for many people. There may be some, though. We hear stories and have had people talk to us and say that they have just, when their child died, they completely closed that world. They never went into the room. They never spoke that person's name. Now, to me, that was not a healthy healing process. So here they are a decade later, and they're stuck. And so that's a journey for them, but you can't force them to go on that.
Yeah. So this, talking about what not to say, I can vividly remember being at a funeral of a friend, and the grieving wife, the widow at this point, one of her, what she thought was a friend, came up to her and said, hey, when you get everything figured out, like, I'll be here for you. And man, that's hard because as strong dads, we're in it, right? We're called to be in the mess. We're in it with our kids. We're as strong men, we're called to be part of those conversations. And maybe you can obviously attest to this more. Like, man, I would just encourage you guys, like, get in this mess with people, with your loved ones, like, join them in it, because I'm sure early on the support is great. Like, you have lots of people, but then, like you were saying, the 3 years later, you start to really see people aren't speaking of her name, right? And you want that. And I think that is, man, just a call out to our dads out there. Like let's not forget about the people, our loved ones. Like stay engaged with family and friends, because like that's our relationships we have outside of our relationship with Jesus. Like our relationships here on earth are hands down the most important thing we can do, and like prioritize those relationships and talk about your daughter when people around you. I think it is a great message to have for our dads.
You mentioned being at a funeral and saying, "How are you doing today? How are you doing today?" Something like that, and feeling like, "Oops, foot in the mouth" kind of thing. But I don't know that is necessarily. I mean, the person may say, they may not have an answer. But
how do you think I'm feeling?
Yeah, you cared. But down the road, it's been a little while since the miscarriage. How are you guys doing? It's been a little while since your friend's suicide. How are you doing processing that? Like you say, be in it and just be aware. Like that was a huge thing in someone's life, and it doesn't go away. It's always going to be there, and the stages and seasons change. And check in and tap in and just kind of inquire about that. You can't go wrong with asking questions like that. How can I help? Now we had a lot of people say, "What can we do?" And it was like, I don't know. So we'll talk about things you can do. But hey, I pulled up a list online because again, I'm not a counselor, so I don't know. But I was like, I wonder what counselors say, what to say or what not to say. So here's what they said: "I know what you're going through." So even somebody who lost a child could say to me, "I know well, my story's different than your story."
Sure.
So
that's what not to
they
say.
say not say. Don't say, "I know what you're going through."
Yeah.
What you could say is, "I am so sorry for what you're going through."
Right.
Or I don't know what you're going through. I mean, is it maybe the appropriate thing to say?
Well, that goes back to the card that says there are not words, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Like I can't even connect,
Yeah.
or I don't want to act like I can.
Yeah.
But I'm here for you.
Yep. So there are no words is different than there are no words, but I love you and I'm here for you. And I know this is going to take time, but we're going to get through this together. Like there are no words, period. End of the card was the one we set aside. It was the one, there are no words. And then there were some additional words. Another thing I read was everything happens for a reason. You talked about that. That's like fist in the face. Like, come on, I'm not ready to hear that. At least they lived a full life. Not
at 16.
At least you had 16 years. Well, 16 or 60, a loss is a loss. Don't try and comfort them by saying. Now, that said, a genuine caring person saying that, there were moments when all of a sudden we realized we had 16 years.
Yeah.
But it was in the moment, like that was a conclusion I needed to come to, not necessarily maybe someone to tell me. You're young enough to have another child. Don't. Yeah. Don't say that.
Yeah,
At least you have Rachel. No, that's not. It was only a dog or a cat. All right, so this one, some people are like, come on.
Might be guilty
that's
of that.
Right. I was just thinking,
guilty
it
of
was
that.
just a dog. It was just a cat. Well, look, you don't know the depth of the connection that person had. Loss is loss. And that's the thing. You can't compare loss. Like, oh, that must be so much worse. Look, a junior high breakup can feel as devastating as a divorce after 30 years to a junior high forming heart. You know what I mean? Parents going and getting a divorce and the separation in the home can be traumatic to feeling abandoned, having a child with a disability, dealing with aging parents and caring for them. These are all different kinds of loss. And loss is loss. They brought it on themselves. No. Any kind of advice. Time heals. Just give it time. Stay busy. It'll just try to move on. Those things are what the counselors would say.
Right.
Don't.
And how many of those did someone say to you?
We felt the love so strongly. Some of those things may have been said. I could not identify beyond one instance something said that was bothersome to me. I was camping with a friend, and he said, and he prefaced it though, and I appreciate that. He said, this probably isn't going to come out right, but it seems like you're not over it yet. And he's the guy, he's somebody that had never said, "I'm so sorry." So to me, it just felt pretty cold and calloused. And if I wasn't so numb, I would have punched him in the face like in that moment. But that was just a tough time. So I didn't have a lot. But here's what did happen, Kyle. People unknowingly would talk about an automobile accident or talk about teen driving. And Julie and I would just kind of sit there, gulp for a minute, and then they would just keep going on talking about it. They were completely unaware. They didn't connect it. But here's the wild thing. I've found myself doing that very same thing about accidents. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, that's my story. And then I think, how many times have I done that to other people? I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of grace for that. And I just think, that fear of saying the wrong thing shouldn't keep us from being in people's lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you're talking through a lot of this, I'm thinking about how I view things. And I would say that by and large, when I'm uncomfortable, I'm an avoider. When I don't quite get it, I don't understand it, I'm not comfortable, I'll just avoid it. And so as you talked about this, I would be the guy that would see Jeff and say, hey, Jeff, when was the last time you went mountain biking? Hey, Jeff, in other words, completely circumvent any conversation about that because I just don't know where I want to go with it or if I can. And so it's more of an inadequacy. So let's just avoid it. Right?
Yeah, and so for you, Merle, I'd just say, and to anybody else out there, to say just, can you help me understand what this is like for you?
Yeah.
And that puts you actually in the position of a learner, and it's somebody who's caring and coming alongside. And they might say, I don't want to talk about it, or they might say, this is a really good stretch for me. I feel like I'm in a place, whatever they may say.
I want to go back to something, Jeff. You talked about several months back, you were in a numb state.
Yeah.
And, I just knew of you during that time. I think my wife knew you, and so I was hearing more through her. And there was just a lot of activity because of your church body, because of, there were kids, I think, that got baptized at her funeral. There was a lot of energy there. Mm-hmm. And you would post some things occasionally, like on Facebook, of just kind of walking through that process. And then, time does happen, right? People go back to work. People go back to their life. And it's really interesting that you then felt a void.
Yep.
All right. So what do you do 3 years later? In the moment, we're fighting fire, right? There's a lot going on. It's right in front of my face, but now it's not. So what do we do in that?
So there's two.
Like, I would not even bring Kayla up 3 years later to you because that would be totally weird for me.
Yeah. So again, I want to normalize this to say, when somebody has gone through a loss, a tragedy, this could be this could even be like a childhood abuse. This could be a devastating job loss. It's not just a death. You know what I mean? There's other traumatic things in people's lives. The tendency is to be superficial or to move forward thinking. But asking, how are you doing in the season? Let me give you an example. In my 6-month ordeal of numbness, I realized, all right, I'm doing the same things I was doing before, but they're not doing the same results. Definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing, expecting to get different results. So I was like, I need to see a counselor. So and our congregation knows this. I'm a very open book and shared that. I'm struggling. I'm in a season where it feels like my heart's in a bag. It's not feeling anymore. I'm not sure why. I'm going to see a counselor. I started seeing a counselor. We were working on mindfulness. And I was kind of feeling like I was getting a little bit of traction, but not really. And it was the worst. Like, feeling pain is better than feeling numbness, because feeling pain means there's an opportunity to also feel joy and hope. Feeling numbness, for me, in my experience, was the worst. And so I had a friend call me, and it's a father figure he's the guy who, when he heard about the accident, got in his truck and drove from New York State, to my house and stayed here for over a week, left behind his job, everything. And he was the one who helped me manage affairs. And he went to the vehicle and retrieved personal items. And he was, he was that guy that was there as my own parents were hospitalized. And so Bob called me. He heard I was in this numb state through my wife to his wife. And he said, what's going on? That's what he said. He's not a man of many words. He's like, what's going on? I said, I don't know. And I tried to describe what I was feeling. And he said, do you have any bitterness? I was like, I don't think so. He's like, do you have any self-pity? Yeah. And I said, I feel like at this stage, coming up on the 3-year anniversary, she's disappearing. It's like the photograph that's fading. And each day she's feeling farther from me, and she's not as real anymore. And that just is like this horrific reality to me. And he said, and I said, here's what I said. I said, I feel like forgetting her. And he said, I want you right now. And he's got permission to do this in my life because he's like, I want you to purpose and decree you will never forget her. You will love her every day of your life. He said, but first, you need to confess and repent of self-pity. I mean, he just shot straight with me. So this was a moment
because you're
where
supposed to have some time for self-pity, right?
Somebody didn't tiptoe around it. And I needed the 2x4 in the face. And I said, okay. He's like, I'm here to help you do it. He said, but you know what to do. And he knows I do know what to do. Yeah. And so I said, God, right now, I confess, I repent of embracing self-pity and getting in bed with something that's killing me. And I rejected it right now. And I purpose and decree I will never forget Kayla. I will love her every day of my life. And there weren't any immediate transformations, but I will tell you about a week later, I felt like the season was changing. And 2 weeks later, I could speak about it in the past tense. That was a significant factor for me. I didn't know I was stuck in some self-pity, and I actually needed confrontation.
Right.
A loving rebuke in the form of questions to help me snap out.
Yeah. And that's where emotions get messy, right? Like if I'm emotionally charged, I don't understand how deep that emotion can take me. And it takes somebody who's not emotionally connected. They get you, but they're not in that feeling of pain to be able to register what healthy looks like.
Yep.
Because it takes that healthy measurement to be able to show you when you're not healthy. And if you can't do that, you take outside eyes to do that. So, man, this is a great conversation. I do want to ask one thing because in my work, I've seen people with challenges like you've talked about with yourself, but I've also seen people stuck. They were devastated the day of the accident, so to speak, and 5 years later, they're hardly even moving.
Yeah.
In other words, to a level we have to, and forgive me here, for a level I have to forget Kayla. In other words, to do life day to day, I have to forget her. And I've known people who've been stuck in grief, that they're paralyzed otherwise, right? Deep depression, just introversion, depression, anger, all of these things. So how do you balance forgetting and not forgetting?
Well, and another question would be, how do you help somebody who's in that state 5 years later and you care about them deeply?
Right.
It's maybe a family member or a good friend. What do you do to help them? Boy, there are so many great programs. I think in your work, you're regularly working with people like this. So getting help from somebody, Rock Solid Families, we offer a Grief Share program. That's an excellent program. We're offering a Surviving the Holidays event coming up. So finding what might be available in your area to be able to talk and process through with people who are sensitized and aware and have some experience in going through this. A safe place, a safe community that you can process things. But I think a lot of people get stuck. I remember, so I've got a memory that just came to mind. Right after it happened, the thing that kept me alive, I called it the IVs. It was truth about God and His plan from the Bible, and then worship. And worship it was like an IV. I mean, we just literally had worship music playing nonstop in our home because it helped us in the midst of the grieving hold on to God and to hold on to hope. And I remember a day I ripped those IVs out, not literal IVs, but figurative IVs, because I just wanted to feel the pain. And I was trying to figure out, why did I do that? Why did I take away the thing that was making me feel, that was bringing healing in my life? And it was because I believed a lie, that if I feel good, I must not have loved her. And so I wonder, and I can't say, but I wonder for a lot of people who are stuck, if they're stuck like I was this summer with some self-pity, feeling like if I let go of self-pity, if I accept she's gone and I the grace of God can help me live again, then I didn't really love her. But if you say that's not true, I love her and always have and always will. Grief is in many ways a sacred expression of love, but grief is different than, grief is a process with different stages and seasons. From my experience, it's different than being stuck in despair and death. And I know a God who can help us.
Yeah.
A God who can help us live again. In fact, I felt like the Lord told me early on, denial will only delay the healing. Healing is a series of choices you can make.
Yeah.
And you can't make someone, but you can reach out to them and say, I'm concerned about you.
Yeah.
Because I want to see you live again. And just how can I help, initiate that conversation.
Yeah. Wow, Jeff. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your insight and just your honesty, your rawness. At the very beginning, before we started to record, I was nervous about just this dance of how do we do this and I don't want to put Jeff in a weird spot. And Jeff, right at the beginning, said, I give you full permission to go anywhere you want to go. I'm totally good. And that, I think from your position, you doing that for us helped us.
Yeah.
All right, it helped us. And so maybe that's, we're talking about how to help strong dads, but sometimes if you're a person in the tragedy,
that's a good point.
Giving people permission.
Absolutely.
Is really
helpful.
critical.
And don't you think that part of that, I mean, and I don't know exactly where, you said you had, a 6-month period where you were numb, right? And that's all part of the grieving process. And again, I just go back to by no means the actual personal experience of the tragedy, but my experience with work. And they talk all the time about the grieving process. So is that something where you have experienced, obviously, a massive tragedy? Is that something you have found going through the grieving process? You find it easier, again, going back to kind of those seasons of giving people permission because you're in a place, because you have the hope? Is that something that you find easier to give people permission because of where you're at in your walk with Christ, or is that just something because of where you're at in the grieving process?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know exactly. I just know that we realized early on if we were going to live, and I don't mean physically live, but if our hearts would live again, we had to process this stuff. We had to work through this stuff. We had to have a community of people in our lives and not shut people out, not isolate. And so I think our hope helped us to do that. I think we were trained through this is something that's coming to mind. How you handle little disappointments is a great proving ground for how you'll handle bigger ones. And so the little disappointments of life, if we just resort to, I'm going to stop at the gas station and, get something to kind of help pick me up through the day, when we're really dealing with an emotional loss, learning how to develop the maturity and I'll say the strength of emotion to tap into that and be aware of that and process that and understand I'm feeling this way because these thoughts kicked in when I got this news or this circumstance. That really helps. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but
no, it does. I mean, just that whole idea of becoming self-aware of how you're processing things, giving yourself permission. I know when my parents went through a divorce, this is many years ago, that was a tragedy for us. And right away I went to fix-it mode, right? Like we were coming to the house, taking care of my mom, doing that. And finally, it was just one afternoon, I just lost it. I just started throwing crap, right? But it felt so good to say, you know what, this is just real, and I don't want to hide it. It is what it is. That just get messy with it, kind of like when you ripped out your IVs, right?
Yeah.
I want to just feel it, and then take that breath, and go, okay, so what does hope look like on the other side?
The cool thing is we've got in our Bible all these psalms and their prayers from these strong guys from the Bible, like David, and they are, God, where are you? Why? How long?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that people don't realize is God has given us lament, which is bringing our anger and all of our feelings, the dark feelings, to God as a means of getting it out instead of holding on to it. And I think if you don't have that, it's harder to process through all those feelings and all the grief.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, as we get closer to closing up this show, man, this is the tough conversation. That's why we wanted to do this little series we're doing. Like, let's again put a face to the tragedy. Put a face to beginning that conversation. And I want to definitely give you an opportunity for any what is some encouragement you can give to our dads out there who have personally experienced a tragedy, and then also people who loved ones who have gone through that and they're trying to just be be something for that someone, like speaking the right word. Like what encouragement can you give to those two kind of different people?
So to the second question, not everybody's a words person. Like not everyone finds it's easy. Some people are, I show my love through action. And some people receive love through action. And so we had a ton of people do things and give gifts. And I just want to speak to that. That was very meaningful to us. As we opened cards, there were gift cards. And I don't know if the person in writing the card thought, are they going to take offense if I give them a $20 gift card? We just received it as love. I had people show up at my house with mowers and mow the grass. I didn't ask for it. I didn't give permission for it. They just did it. There were gifts, wind chimes, personalized gifts that people made for us. Someone had a custom bench made with a verse of scripture and something that was very meaningful for Kayla. And all of those things were powerful. Meals, the tangible expressions of love. And so if you know someone who's going through a hard time, we've talked about what to say, but what to do matters too. And if you're waiting for them to initiate, they may never initiate. We wouldn't have. We wouldn't have said, can someone come mow our grass? Yeah. I would have just tried, I would have let the grass grow, really. I mean, right. But sometimes people just did it. Now, we needed a little privacy, so we didn't want a constant flow of visitors. When people came, they didn't stay long. And that's true for like hospital visits, if being there matters, but not, it can be draining to be with people a long time right. too. So those were all things that coupled with the words were powerful. And then in terms of if you're going through, if you're a strong dad and you don't feel strong, you've got a major thing that has hit you, I think just to be able to admit I'm weak. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, to feel like, I'm all right. No, again, look to Jesus as the example. He was able to publicly embrace his sorrow. And that takes a strength. Meekness is power under control. And being able to control and channel and say, I'm mad, but I'm not going to do something that's counterproductive. I'm going to communicate my anger and learn how to use words to do that. And so don't do it alone is the only other thing I'd say is find a group of people and ultimately your God who wants to be the only source to help you not only survive but live again after what feels like you could never live again.
Yeah. Great words. Jeff, I don't really want to add anymore. I just think that that's a great way to end it right there. I want to thank you again for your time and just being aware. I don't want to say something stupid here, but God gives us things that are difficult. It's up to us as to how we walk through them and what we use them for.
Absolutely.
Not that Kayla had to die so that you could learn this, but now that now it can be used. And so I thank you for allowing Strong Dad's platform to be another place to reach out. Kayla lives through these kinds of conversations. And so I think that that's extreme value. Let's thank our sponsors and let's wrap it up.
Yep, Kramer's Beer House, Casey Outdoor Solutions. Thanks so much for coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate it. Makes doing a show like this possible. So grateful for those two businesses. Go out there and check them out. Jeff, thanks so much, man. It's just again, not easy conversations, but conversations that I think need to happen. So really appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate everybody else who's really taking this to heart to be somebody who makes a big difference and is a strong dad.
Yeah.
Awesome.
If you are going through a difficult time or a tragedy in your life, as Jeff's talked about, get connected, whether it's with your church, your pastor, even good friends. If you need outside help, you can contact us at Rock Solid Families. That's part of what we do as well. And so, don't act like this is something you have to go alone. You can reach us at 812-576-7625 or just go onto our website and check it out there. You can email us and just see if maybe there's something there that we could help with. So, again, we thank you all. Go out there and be a strong dad. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.